Hello and welcome to the live stream. So as the professor, I'm going to have to dock Shashank because he's a few minutes late. But what we're going to do in the meantime, while he figures out how to get on the live stream, is I'm going to pull on Jeff and we are going to talk about his resume. So Jeff.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Yeah, same here.
So I'm just, Oh, let's see. Shashank said he's on now. Weird. So Shashank, if you're watching this, check your email. There should be a link to get in the back end of the interface. But Jeff, so to buy us a little bit of time, why don't you tell the audience about what we did in person? So I met with you one-on-one yesterday, and I think we did some really cool stuff.
Yeah, it was cool. So, I mean, you had developed a resume template essentially with a student in the past and somebody else. So we kind of went over that and switched my resume that I had currently from the past and kind of formatted into that template. And then we were kind of looking at different internships and stuff that would be kind of my ballpark relating to this class, and kind of tried to build it towards so it fit for those postings, and then looked at Jobscan to kind of just optimize that and get the best resume you can. So
awesome.
Pretty much the gist.
Look who it is. Shashank.
Hey guys. Sorry about
doing?
that. Doing well. I just got finished with a meeting on my end, so I was like, I gotta go, guys. I gotta go.
I figured. I mean, this is the nature of it being live, is that there are going to be hiccups. What you guys didn't see is that I had an audio issue right before we hit live, and I was like, oh no, it's not working. But so Shashank, I'm super excited about having you on because we're going to do multiple things. So you're going to give kind of a rundown of SQL or SQL, whatever team you're on. And it's really, really timely because I was just telling the audience that me and Jeff met one-on-one yesterday to get his resume prep for some job opportunities. And guess what showed up in the skill section?
Ooh. SQL knowledge?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is interesting in that this is an internship designed for someone in undergrad. So we checked it to make sure it wasn't for a master's level student. What is the expectation in terms of SQL from because are you a hiring manager or do you sit on hiring panels?
I sit on hiring panels. So I myself am not a hiring manager because I don't manage people. I manage projects. And so my input is usually there to make sure the applicants' technical skills are up to snuff and some of their business skills are up to snuff. So within my team, I'm usually the one that handles technical interviews.
Okay, awesome. But before we get into that, Shashank, I think from a very self-interested YouTuber perspective, Jeff, do you want to share your screen and talk about, well, actually, let me share my screen and I can, we're doing ad test right now. And here, let me pull this up. And I wanted to do just a little gut check on knowledge to make sure that the students are doing some learning here. So let's pull up these preliminary tests. Jeff, can you explain to Shashank what we've been doing? Let me change this so it's showing all the data. So
yes,
Jeff,
so
what's going on here?
So I mean, I guess like the strategy has been just to minimize the cost per click through the marketing campaign, through YouTube ads, trying to get, I mean, as most impressions and views as just to make it more effective. But we talked a little bit about, like you had mentioned, that we were kind of over optimizing on the cost per click and everything, because it was like, what was it, like 12 cents or 2 cents or something ridiculously cheap.
Well, okay, you're getting ahead of yourself in the story, Tyler. So why don't you break down the KPIs that are on screen right here for Shashank?
Yeah, so I mean, we had the impressions, the views, the costs, and the clicks. So I mean, impressions, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the first 5 seconds, how many people view that. And then if you watch the first 30 seconds, it's the amount of views. And then the cost total, and then the clicks. So if you wanted to figure out cost per clicks, you just divide those to figure out that price.
So right now, Shashank, we just threw ad dollars on YouTube, and then we came over to YouTube placements only, which this was a couple weeks back. We just did a data drop of here's the data for this, and then we actually had the VP of Truist analyze the data, build a dashboard, and then share it on our hashtag DC Analytics tab. So Jeff, what are we looking at in terms of our key KPI of cost per clicks? Are we heading in the right direction?
Well, it seems like it for compared to the last one.
So yeah, this one's like around $1, and then the preliminary test, it was around $7. And what I haven't, and this is a very fresh data set. I haven't showed anyone this yet, but we just tried a new strategy, and check this out.
Oh, wow.
So Jeff, what do you think is going on? Well, okay, I guess interpret this for me and Shashank. What's going on here?
I mean, whatever you did that changed made a huge difference. I mean, you spent less money than you did on the first 2 campaigns, and you had like 10 times the amount of clicks.
Right.
I
mean, these are insane numbers compared to, it was around $7. We got it down to $1. Now it's like, I think around 3 cents per click. And what we did, by the way, this is a side tangent, but what we're going to be talking about in the Friday live stream for the podcast is how to turn your side projects to bring new opportunities. So I've just accepted, I'm going to be teaching digital marketing to you guys in the spring semester. So you guys are going to be developing campaigns with the budget that I'm giving you to actually have some real world, I'm going to help you put it into a LinkedIn kind of experience. I think we're going to call it like an apprenticeship. And then that's going to hopefully help you guys land some jobs. But the difference here is that we explored the display network. So display networks are ads that are not on YouTube. And what I found is that YouTube ads are extremely expensive. So, I mean, look at the cost here. So for $215, we got 96% of actual clicks, which is insane. So I just kind of wanted, Jeff, good job on explaining this. Shashank, what do you think? Have you ever, number one, I've never seen a college class where it's like we're using real ad dollars to kind of test the market. This is so fun for me.
No, I think it's super cool. It's and at the end of the day, like, using real data is how you actually get people to get interested in any of this stuff, right? Like, why does analytics even matter? Why should anyone care about any of this stuff, right? Well, it's because it allows you to put pressure on the areas of greatest impact for your business. That's what analytics lets you do. So you can work 10 times as hard and get, 1/2 the result as you used to, or you can analyze the data and be like, okay, let me, put in 1/10 the effort and get 10 times leverage here, No, so this is super cool. I think this is amazing.
Right. And that's kind of what I wanted to illustrate kind of with this quick kind of walkthrough is that's exactly right. You mentioned leverage. I mean, this is a huge lever we're pulling. And what this is telling me is that maybe display networks and not YouTube are the ways that we should advertise the learning platform moving forward. But all right, enough of me sharing. Jeff, I want you to pull up your screen and let's look at that job posting. And I think that's going to be a perfect segue into Shashank talking about SQL.
All right, so this was the job posting from Volvo Group for a visualization and analytics internship in the spring. So I mean, kind of the description and everything, and goes into it. It was the amount of kind of software applications and things like that. I was kind of surprised by just how much they were kind of expecting.
Can I pause you there, Shashank? Does this seem reasonable? I know this is the first time you're getting to see this.
Yeah, this is an internship.
Correct. For undergrad students.
All right. Do you mind going all the way to the top for a second? Let's take it from the top and go down. Okay, so visualization analytics, spring 2022. several key ETL positions. Oh, cool. You'd be working at FP&A. Python, SQL, scripting, debugging. Okay, cool. Action oriented. Okay, this is all business stuff. Technical. Okay, can learn new skills and knowledge quickly. Staying alone. Okay, we can go down to essential skills and required experience. All right, applicant must be currently, okay, that makes sense. Able to work 30 hours per week. Okay, applicants must have a minimum 200 BI applications. Okay, working with Python, R, Stat, or similar scripting. Okay, so I'm about to drop some knowledge on some people here. So long story short, so I've been on for the last 3 companies I've worked at. I've helped out with hiring, and I have a decent idea of how the process works. Everything except for salaries. That's the only thing I've never worked with. One, because I'm not a manager, I can't decide salaries, and I'm also not HR. But one thing I've noticed is that what will usually happen is a team will say, okay, new year, new budget. We need X number of teammates this year added to the team. And then a couple of months down the line, the manager will be like, okay, like now we actually have the time to go worry about this. Go to the HR manager and you'll say, okay, HR manager, I need a applicant at this level. They need to be operating within the 99th percentile of the market or the 50th percentile of the market or whatever. Depending on what function you are in a business, you may not always want people that work at the 99th percentile of the market, basically meaning the highest performers, because they demand the highest salaries. And what happens is you give the HR manager all that information. And in a lot of non-FANG companies, so not like elite tech companies, the hiring managers, they have to hire for a billion different positions, and their teams are relatively small or they're contractors. So they don't like know the business super well. They were kind of hired on, and they're hired and fired, really quickly. And because of that, what they'll do is that they'll look up generalized job descriptions and just like throw a bunch of stuff onto it. And then what happens is they'll bring on some candidates that like, okay, this person like knows some of the stuff here and there. And usually, at least in my experience from hiring manager's perspective, again, unless you're looking for an elite tech company where like you are expected to know all of this stuff all at the same time, that's why they pay elite tech salaries. If you can get 2 or 3 of the things down well during the interview, then you're a competitive candidate. So for example, even our job descriptions for data analyst level 2, we ask that they know Python, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, everything. And obviously, if we can get a unicorn candidate that knows all that stuff, that's awesome. But if someone knows 2 of the 3 things and they have great business skills, that's more than good enough. And for an internship, the standards will be even lower because obviously, part of the internship is you're supposed to teach the intern how stuff works. If I were you, I think where you can have the maximum impact with the minimum effort, because I'm all about that life, maximum impact, like minimal effort. I would say, well, yeah, and then, it's not even about being lazy, right? It's about like, oh, now I can, my 100 units of effort can be put in, have a lot greater impact somewhere else. I would say focus on the BI tools, and I want to say Python, but SQL will probably get you there faster. Because the good thing is you can actually get a solid understanding of SQL in like a week of like just like really, if you like really sit down and grind it out. You could get a decent understanding of SQL within that amount of time, potentially enough to pass the technical interview. So,
okay, cool.
Bit of a bunch of information over there. So, any specific questions or anything?
No, I mean, that was my main question. Was you kind of explained it, how you said that they just dump all of the kind of requirements in there, and that pretty much helped that what you said. So,
because I'm not the one writing the job description, or not me. The hiring manager is not the one writing the job description. It's an HR manager who, again, bless their heart, they have to, hire thousands of people, right? But they don't know what analysts do to they don't know what they need to be doing. Again, this is different for tech companies like Google and stuff, because they will have technical hiring managers because they have so much money. So they'll have like, oh, this is an analytics technical hiring manager. So if Google says you need to know that, that's different.
Yeah, gotcha.
So what I love about what we're doing in the classroom right now is that you mentioned, just kind of in passing, Shashank, you're just dropping nuggets of wisdom right now. But you mentioned the business acumen. So that's why I'm trying to get the students not only to work with my real data to come up with experiences they can talk about in a business setting, but also kind of how to brand themselves. Because we can see on his LinkedIn page, I mean, we're going to beef this up. This is just the first pass at it. But I mean, this is a concrete story that he can tell about. We created an A/B split test for our email marketing campaigns. So like he knows how to use data. And also, I mean, that's a pretty I guess that's a pretty standard, but also effective analytic strategy is A/B split testing, which I don't know how many students who are in an undergrad level are going to be able to say, oh yeah, I ran an A/B split test with a 1,000-person email list, and here are the results that we found.
It definitely makes you competitive at the end of the day. And the funny thing is, like, especially if you talk to like a lot of master students, this is where you can stick out compared to master, because you might be competing against some master students for this. I don't know if they specifically said only grad or only undergrads.
Yeah, I didn't see it in there, so I wasn't sure.
Right, so you might be competing with master students. To answer John David's original question, I don't think this is unrealistic for an undergrad to know. If they're a CS graduate, they'll know this, for example. So the competition out there is tough. I'll be honest with that. But that's where I would say the business knowledge is where you can really stick out, because at the end of the day, if someone knows a bunch of languages, like, that's awesome. But if they can't, if I give them a problem and they can't model it out for me, like, you know, by hand or something, and like explain to me, okay, here are the considerations you have to have, here are the stakeholders you have to talk about, how do you manage stakeholders, stuff like that, then they are a weaker candidate than you would otherwise think. So being very well spoken is a very key skill to have too. And oftentimes people with greater technical skills are not incredibly well spoken and don't necessarily know how to break down a business problem. They know how to break down a technical problem. I'll say, okay, like, ETL this data from this database into that database, doing this transformation. You know, instantly I'll get an amazing answer. But then I'm like, okay, we want to model out revenue for the next year. Here are some features. Go nuts. Tell me what to do. You know,
Right.
That open-ended question is really difficult for some people. And I think if you don't have all of the technical skills listed out here, that's where you can really, you know, stick out.
Yeah, stand out. Yeah.
All right, so let's pull that back up. So what knowledge of Oracle and SQL Server database and scripting? So
People just say that. Yeah, no. You just have to know SQL. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, and so SQL, like everyone talks about SQL, right? SQL is a non-standard language though. So the Python I use and the Python that you use is the exact same Python. It's a standard language. There's no difference between them, except unless you use Python 2 or Python 3, but, you know, no one should be using Python 2. But SQL is non-standard. It changes from database to database. So for example, like Oracle, one of the biggest database makers in the entire world, they have their own version of SQL. Microsoft has something called transactional SQL or T-SQL. Teradata has TerraSQL. Google has BigQuery SQL. The basic language is the same. What changes is what certain words do. So for example, in like AWS with like Redshift, you can't use, or you have to use limit, you can't use top, but on Teradata you can. And so don't let that intimidate you. The point I'm making over here is that, especially if you tell the hiring manager that, you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm used to XYZ SQL, so I know what these things are. Then they'll know, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. And they know that, like, I don't actually expect them to know all the SQL in the world. So for example, in my experience, like, I know SQL, but I know T-SQL and I know Teradata SQL. So, but I can pick up the other ones quickly because the basics are the same. And if I'm ever in an interview and I find a question I'm not like 100% certain about, but I tried something and it doesn't work, then I'll be very clear with the hiring manager. I'll be like, oh no, I'm like, this works in T-SQL, like I know it does. So when they say, sorry, that was a really long explanation for when they say,
hey, Shashank,
Oracle
is there
SQL?
like a TV running on in the background? I'm hearing a lot of background noise. Or are you just
sorry
like
about
in
that.
a busy office?
I'm in a Starbucks right now. So I was
you were cracking me up today, man.
well, I was live streaming the other day, and the Wi-Fi in my Airbnb is just so bad. It just kept cutting out. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to go to a Starbucks now.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. That makes a whole lot more sense. That makes a whole lot more sense. So
no, otherwise I would have picked somewhere quieter.
No, that's well. I mean, Shashank, I'm just glad you're here because I there's so much to unpack. Jeff, feel free to go re-listen to all, because what you're getting is knowledge specifically to your job hunt. So
sorry. So just to finish that quick thought over there, or not quick thought, a very incredibly long thought. When they say Oracle SQL or like Microsoft SQL, don't worry about the company name there. Just worry about the word SQL, because you'll apply for another job and they'll ask you to know Teradata SQL. You know, no one can know that unless they like work at a company that uses that database. Because I mean, I don't know where else you're going to get access to an Oracle database, right? So just learn SQL. And small plug, I do have a SQL course on my YouTube channel, which is just, it's standardized, and 90% of the stuff there should work on any database. There's like a thing here or there that, you know, might be different, but usually you just like say, again, you tell the hiring manager, hey, this works in this database. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. So, and it's funny that you beat me to the punch. I was going to bring up, like, could Jeff watch your hour-long SQL course, because it sounds like you don't need to know how to actually run the scripts. You just need to kind of know it at a high level for this specific situation. Or should he go and get a bunch of reps in?
you should get a couple of reps in.
Okay.
At least for me, I don't remember jack if I don't get some reps in. So it doesn't matter how much I study something. If I don't do it, I don't remember it. That SQL course I have on my YouTube channel, no promises, but should get you to a place where you can confidently go into an interview. You know, now whether you perform well or not, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I can't comment on that. But you should confidently be able to go into an interview with that knowledge.
Yeah. And what we're going to start doing, we haven't done this as much this semester, but what I did last year is that every time we'd work through a case study, I'd pull one of the students up to the front of the class and then do a mock interview. Because I think that they need to be hammered home on how, and that's, I mean, actually, I'm not being like, we're still doing that because Jeff, we just did that to kick off this episode where you're explaining the business theory behind why are we looking at the numbers and the data. Actually, to piggyback on that, so you mentioned that we might have over optimized on a specific metric. What is that metric, and why do you think that might be the case?
So we had talked about well, it was the cost per click, over optimizing on that, because getting to a certain point with the amount of views and everything, we were talking about how we might actually be hitting a target audience that can't really afford the course. So it might not even be doing any good with reaching part of that audience.
I'm proud of you. You nailed it. That's Shashank, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the kind of insight that the super technical people, that's a nuance that they would miss. So they're like fixated on optimizing metrics, but it's like, all right, well, if someone costs 3 cents to reach on a YouTube ad, what does that mean in terms of their discretionary income?
I would say like if you're talking about like the engineering types, there's a reason engineers and analysts aren't the same people. You know, there's a reason that just because someone has the technical skills, they can't necessarily analyze data. Now, that being said, I have made the mistake of not assuming there are a lot of unicorns out there. So I would also say, you know, it is important to know what your advantages are, but don't ever underestimate what the competition can do, because the competition is, you know, there are people that are, you know, out there slogging it out, learning everything. So
interesting. Okay. So your advice is contradicting. So Ash, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but he was a former data scientist that worked for LinkedIn. He's now at Atlassian Marketing.
Cool.
He was saying that the unicorns are extremely rare. He says there's a huge amount, there's a glutton of competition for entry-level jobs, but once you get to mid to senior level, I mean, you can essentially, it's like a chart your own adventure book, you know?
Yeah. We're not really talking about the mid to senior level positions right now, but you're 100% right. Yeah, once you get to that level, I can't speak too much for senior levels. I only just became a senior recently. But I can definitely say for I guess I would say, for an entry level position, it's important that you show a willingness to learn. And I just want to like kind of like preface what I'm saying about like these advantages that you have. Make sure you don't like not understand that there are people out there who will do everything. They're very rare, but they are there.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is that, I mean, since, you know, you're plugging away, I'm plugging away here. On Friday, we have actually one of my neighbors who he was an engineer for Facebook and now is transitioning into a position at Adobe. But the reason he got that job, he got actively recruited, not for the work that he was doing as a Facebook engineer, but because he was building his own side projects. So he like actively, and we're going to get into, well, but also too, like me and him got a beer on Sunday night Friday night. And we're talking about kind of like his view of the marketplace, which I mean, that was a hugely illuminating conversation because he was talking about the relationship between he has with like high level recruiters and high level talent. It's almost like the recruiters become your agent. because they are getting the top level recruiters are getting all the preferential jobs. And if you have a track record where you've helped them make a lot of money, then all of a sudden they're feeding you all these roles, and they know who you are and they trust you. So I mean that you're right. That is a different conversation about kind of advanced level analytics. But use that word unicorn. How could Jeff here become a unicorn for this internship or entry level job? It's 9 months from now.
Ooh, okay, that's an interesting question. So if you want to become a unicorn, there are so many ways to go about it. And I should also preface everything by like a lot of this is very much like my point of view. That's not to remove responsibility for what I'm telling people, because I think I should stick behind what I'm saying. But that's more to say that I have a very limited worldview that is colored by just how I got to where I am today. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that people you go see what other people say as well. That being said, in my opinion, one excellent way to do that is to build up the basic technical skills. And the reason I like the technical skills is because they kind of give you like the toolbox upon which you can then go execute business decisions on. Now, some other people, they actually do it the other way around, where they build up the business skills, and now they have a thought framework, and they're like, okay, now I just have to figure out which tool I can use to like I know where the nails. I'm an architect. I know how to build a house. Now I just need to know, okay, like which nail goes where, and like how do I actually put a nail inside a piece of plywood. I use a hammer. I have to go find the tool for that. So I think there are two basic ways to go about it. I personally like the technical way because as an entry level, it gives you more options, in my opinion, because it is common for entry level people not to have business knowledge, but a lot of entry level people will have technical skills as well, and a lot of them won't. So I think the technical skills kind of like give you like, oh, this guy can do something, and we'll teach him the business stuff afterwards. But I say, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to go figure out, chart your own path. At the end of the day, I came from a family of engineers, right? So that's just kind of like, I was more or less raised to think that way. And I know people who like their families are significantly more business minded, and they just have my girlfriend, her entire family, they're just business people.
That's me.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they're business people, and like their whole like thought process of like going about and solving problems is a bit different than like how I decide to solve problems. So I would say, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on about here. So that's kind of me trying to like tell you that, my advice is very much colored by like the way I was raised, how I found my own success, stuff like that.
All right. I'm going to weigh in here from the complete opposite perspective, because I have very little technical skills, yet I am talking with business owners about how they can use data to drive their business. And my consulting practice has generated, I think over, tens of millions of dollars over the past 5 years. But I will just bring in the technical people. But I'm in a different place because I went directly from my MBA into consulting. And what's weird, it's a power differential. So if you hire me as a consultant, you're paying me hundreds of hours to come in and give you my advice. So there's authority behind what I'm saying. But the downside of that is that I'm a line item, so I could get just nixed. COVID just wiped out my consulting, to where like most analysts, I don't think lost their job. Not as many analysts lost their jobs as, consultants. But Shashank, to your point,
it's easier to keep a job in bad times.
Right. So yeah, so that's kind of a cost benefit analysis there. But to piggyback off your point of, if you're looking to get your entry level job or an internship, should you focus on technical or business? Well, a CEO of a company that's doing 150 million in revenue isn't going to take the advice of a Jeff. What are you, 21?
22.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
20.
Yes.
Forgive me.
Same thing.
So yeah, if I'm 55 and I run a company that's, doing what was that, 9 figures, I'm not going to take the business advice of someone who, quite frankly, has had no real business experience. But on the flip side of that, most 55-year-old business owners have zero technical knowledge or very little. So I think that is a point of leverage. Shashank, would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And I would also say, like one great thing that John David had is like, I'm guessing the MBA was also helpful as well, right?
I had one client ask if I had where my degree was. A lot of it is just like walking into the room like you own it. And also too, this is funny. I had one client was like, "Of course you have a man bun. You're in tech." So a lot of it's like personal branding, and then just actually, I'll be honest. So back 3 or 4 years ago, I had Silvertone Analytics was an LLP. So I had two business partners. One was a fractional CEO. The other one was the CEO of a marketing agency. So we did a lot of sales and marketing analytics. Just by association, I was seen as, an authority figure because basically, I mean, Gary Fly, who was my business partner that was a fractional CFO or CXO. So he did everything except for CFO. So CMO, COO, CEO. So he would come to companies that were flailing and flip them kind of like a house. So he had a huge amount of just trust and demonstrated performance over a long period of years. So as a student, you're probably not, although I'm kind of exploring this right now to where my intern is now taking over my consulting practice. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that you're right. Getting the technical side of things is a good kind of brand positioning point for younger people. Now, well, Shashank, what would you say if like someone isn't as interested in because I'm just, to be blunt, I'm not super interested in the technical side of things.
That's really difficult for me to comment on, honestly. I think this is where I would have to step back and say, like, this is where I'm ignorant.
Okay.
And I don't know because that's not how I built my career. And the people I work with are highly technical people. So I 100% think that you can build an analytics career without being technical. I just don't have the necessary experience to comment too much on that. And so that's where I have to like step back and say, like, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question to, but
okay.
I 100% think it can be done.
Let's pivot the question then. How did you break into the analytics space? Because I know you were a chemistry major, right?
Yeah. I had a chemistry degree from Emory University. So,
which you didn't right? I watched your podcast episode with Ken G, by the way.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks. No, that was really good. No, that was an interesting episode. It was interesting because I think in some ways Ken, in a couple of ways, Ken is a little bit similar to me. In that I think he didn't like his bachelor's either. He did his master's in data science, I believe.
You guys are both super data nerds.
Right. I think he's a pretty core technical guy. I mean, now he's a director, but I think at least a little bit earlier, he was a core technical guy too. So sorry, yes, I got into my career basically by, it was completely by chance. And then what happened was I got an internship. I had no job. And then I just happened to get an internship. Funny thing, the internship was actually meant for college students, but I was graduated by that time, and they just the company just didn't check, I guess. And so I got the internship, and it was in IT, and I hated IT, couldn't stand it, and I was like, my God, I don't want to be working with ERP systems my entire life, because I was like an ERP analyst or something. I was like, God, this is boring. So for anyone that doesn't know, ERP is enterprise resource planning. It's more or less, it is the plumbing by which all businesses are run. It's a piece of software that sits in the back room that manages all your revenue and all your super core data, of here's the basis of how the business runs. So analyzing how you map all those fields together and everything, that's not my cup of tea. Props to people that do it. It's a very lucrative profession, and very secure too. Everyone needs ERP. So then what happened was I went to the 6th floor, which is where the supply chain department was. And I started asking people, I'm like, hey, do you have any work for me? Eventually one team took pity on me, gave me a bunch of cards for shipping partners that the company had, and say, okay, go put this inside Excel. And I'm like, it was complete grunt work. It was like no one was going to be using this Excel spreadsheet I built, but I went ahead, did it in a day. And then a director happened to see that I was putting in all that work, and she told another director who was hiring in supply chain, hey, I think this might be a good candidate for someone to hire. And then it was kind of it was very Texan way of doing it. It was a handshake, and we were off to the races. And I, more or less got the job, that week. Very informal. And from there, luckily I fell into the analytics team, started off with Alteryx, which is a great tool for, it basically is like Python, but GUIfied. So it's all a GUI, and you can do everything.
Tableau Prep or the Power Query Editor.
It's a more advanced version of Tableau Prep, exactly. So Tableau Prep was built to fill in the gap that Tableau had that had to be built in by Alteryx before. Great tool. Then went to my second company, and then my boss oh, do you want do you want an Alteryx license? And at that moment I realized I'm like, oh shoot, without the $6,000 Alteryx license, I actually can't do any of the stuff I've learned how to do over the last year. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go like learn Python. So I told him, no, I'm good with the license, and then basically told him I could do a bunch of stuff that I could normally do in 5 minutes in Alteryx, and then would like work overnight to like figure out how to like jury rig it together in Python. So that pressure cooker was what got me there. And from there, after I learned Python, the technical skills became easy to learn because that intimidation factor was gone. There's a huge intimidation factor associated with code. And I think once you get over that, then it is significantly easier to learn how to do it.
Gotcha. All right. So how about this? Let's cut to a commercial break, which will give me some time to go through the chat to pull in some. We've got a bunch of people in chat, and I feel bad. Sorry, chat. I've been neglecting you. But let me run the commercial, and I'll have some questions queued up, and then we can get your thoughts on that, Shashank. Are you looking for real data to analyze? An actual problem? Are you looking for real data to analyze? An actual problem to solve? An experience worth talking about in an interview? Well, in this case study course, you get a real-world problem with a messy data set and a business outcome that's on the line. My name is John David, and I'm the founder of Silvertone Analytics, a boutique consulting agency that focuses on business analytics. I'm also a professor of analytics at Greensboro College. And in 2021, I had the privilege of combining these two worlds. My real-world Greensboro College students got to work with my Silvertone Analytics clientele for the Analytics Minor capstone course at Greensboro College. This case study course is modeled after the lessons, the trials, and the tribulations that my students went through in the Analytics Minor capstone course. My students got to work directly with the president of an organization that is clearing over $150 million in revenue every year. And this case study course keeps the exact same data structures that they worked through in that case study. But I anonymized the data to protect my client's privacy. So are you ready to solve a real-world business use case? Build a killer analytics portfolio, and even learn how to communicate these findings in an interview setting? Well, click the Take This Course button now and join me inside. All right, so here we go. So Ritvik Gupta asks, I'm a business and informatics student, and I want to get into data/business analytics. I have knowledge of SQL, some Python, and Tableau. What next step should I take to achieve my goal?
All right. Okay, let's see. So I'm guessing he's asking how to get a job in the field. So I always like to preface anything I say by, so I do YouTube, and on my YouTube channel, I have a very international audience. So I always like to preface everything by saying I've spent my entire career working in the United States. Not to say that the knowledge isn't transferable, but different countries and different markets, they value different sets of skills. So that's just something I want to like make sure people understand whenever I do give my advice. I only have experience with the American market. That being said, let's see. He has knowledge of SQL, Python, and some Tableau. I think the biggest bang for your buck as far as an entry-level job is concerned is probably going to be a BI tool like Tableau. If you know Tableau or you know Power BI, you can immediately start working in analytics. It's a relatively easy tool to understand, and you can immediately start working in analytics with a decent salary. So I would say if you want to advance any of these particular skills, Tableau is the biggest bang for your buck. The most extensible skill is Python. Because when you know Python, Python can literally do anything. But it also, the learning curve is significantly higher. So you might want to start off with Tableau, build out that like basic knowledge of how data works, joins, unions, data blends, data types, stuff like that. You learn all that through Tableau, and then go and pick up some other skills beyond that. And then one thing I always like to tell people, you never get a job you haven't, you won't get an entry-level job you didn't apply for. And so apply like mad. And I think that is advice that I don't think enough people heed as much as they should. You should be applying like crazy if you want to get a job.
Shashank, I'm so disappointed in you. What about a Tableau public portfolio? That's the big brand piece right there. So I think that
you're 100% right. Yeah.
So, and that's what we're. Well, I'm being facetious here, but that's actually what we're doing. The instead of having a test, which I think tests are kind of silly. It's like, how well can you stay up all night and memorize this stuff? The students, each one of them has to develop a Tableau public portfolio, and I'm going to grade their featured portfolio piece on form and function. So I think that is, well, also too, you're in the field, you're actively practicing this, and it sounds like we're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like, well, that's the big criticism of academia, is that they're like, they lag 15 to 20 years behind.
No, I mean, I think what you're doing is very much in line. I see Rithwik mentioned he's a student in the U.S. That's a preface I give before I answer any questions.
Okay.
So if you watch my live stream, it's like the first thing I say, because I just want to make sure people understand that like advice has to be targeted, I believe, and I want to make sure that everyone's like aware that there's potential limitations to the advice I give.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting is like 26% of our audience is the U.S., 24 is India, and they're drastically different market forces on how to get a job in the two different locations.
Yes. The market forces in India are like, I don't understand them, and they're very, very, it's very, very, very competitive over there. There aren't nearly enough.
It really is.
The state I'm from, Tamil Nadu, they have an entire word. It's like a BIP, basically means unemployed graduate, because there's such a problem with unemployed graduates over there. Because people are overeducated. Yeah, so it's the exact opposite problem you have in the U.S., where people are undereducated for the jobs we need here. People in India are overeducated a lot of the times for the jobs necessary over there.
Gotcha. All right, so we got to follow up to that. In a technical round with SQL, do we need to write script or just need to know how to solve the problem?
I would expect the person to write the script. If your business skills are, if you've aced every other part of the interview, and then you can kind of just explain how your logic works with the SQL script, then I might give you a pass. So what happens is, at least, in my experience, usually you have a couple of people interview the person, and then you all come together as a panel, like on one day, and then you give a thumbs up, thumbs down, basically. And then people can go to bat for you, and people don't, or they might not. If you can't write the script, you're going to have a hard time having people go to bat for you, because at the end of the day, when it comes to these technical skills, if I'm giving you a technical interview, I expect you to know how to, do the skill. And that's not to sound harsh. That's just to be really realistic with people. So actually, I backtrack on that. If you are given a technical interview, you are expected to actually be able to execute on the script. And the thing is, usually you'll have like 5 to 10 questions. You don't have to get every single one right. But if you are struggling with the first and second question, then that's a decent sign that unless they can't find any other competitive candidates, then you're going to have a hard time with the interview.
Okay, so let's root this down on Jeff's use case. Do you think that for an internship, for that visualization internship at Volvo, do you think he would have a technical for a round, or do you think that it would just be?
That's hard for me to comment on. I would expect them to have a technical interview.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Any reputable company will tell you have a technical interview before you show up, So like you schedule an interview a week in advance, or at least a couple of days in advance. Usually you don't have an interview like the next day. And what happens is I always ask the hiring manager, or not the hiring manager, sorry, the HR manager, is there going to be a technical interview? And then if they say yes and nothing else, then I ask them, okay, is it going to be Python, SQL, Tableau? Like you actually give examples of what you're asking for, because it's really important to train. Because at the end of the day, if I went and took a technical interview in Python today and I use Python every single day, and I'm not an expert at it, but like I know my way around it. But if you gave me a technical interview today, I may not pass it, because sometimes you oftentimes have to study for them, because they ask you these sometimes they like they can be designed poorly and ask you questions that have nothing to do with the actual job themselves, which is why you have to study. So what I would recommend to Jeff is go ahead and just ask after you get an invitation to be interviewed, go ahead and ask that question. And that's advice I give to anyone. You should know exactly what language you're going to be using in the technical interview, because a SQL interview works very differently from a Python interview or a Tableau interview.
Yeah, I was about to say, so I've advised students on taking Tableau interviews, and what I've seen is that they'll be like, here's a data set, build a dashboard, and we'll talk about your approach to analytics or analyzing this problem. So I'm so glad that you're on here, because SQL is not my area of expertise.
I was gonna say, Stony Vincent's dropping mad knowledge in the chat for anyone that wants to see. He has a couple of points that it's obvious the guy has experience. And
he was on the podcast 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I that's right. I thought I recognized the name. The second to last comment he just sent, ensure you ask questions about that. That is key. I was interviewing a candidate last week. Excellent candidate. Was, in my opinion, again, I'm a very technically focused guy. So like for me, it was like, and I was giving the technical interviews. I'm like, oh, this person's excellent. I really like this candidate. Shouldn't give genders. The person's business skills were a little bit lacking. So the person got my recommendation, but not necessarily someone else's. But one criticism I would have given the person is that even though I told them, and I tell everyone this, like I'm very straightforward in my interviews. I'm like, hey, ask questions, walk me through your process. The more you say, generally speaking, the better, because I get an idea of what you're thinking about. And it's better because, the more they say, I can either tell if they know the language or not. And
what is that Mark Twain quote? It's better to remain silent than voice the fact that you don't know what's going on, so everyone can see that you're
right. But in this, I would, and that's where, like, it's a little bit of game theory, right? Like I have my own interest in this whole process as a hiring person, and they have their own interest in this whole process. But make sure you ask questions about a business problem. People that just go blindly into solving problems, it's very concerning, because it's better to do something right the first time than it's better to check and do something right the first time than to do it wrong and have to do it over again.
Yeah. Well, I think that is it's a signal of almost emotional unintelligence, in that I'm anxious about answering this, so I'm just going to blah an answer out instead of composing myself, taking a deep breath, digesting what was said, thinking about it, and then but I mean that's kind of like a personal power dynamics insight, though. But yeah,
and that's why I try and tell people. I'm very straightforward with them. I tell them to ask me questions, but even because I get it, people are nervous, they really want the job, and I'm in the position of power here. But it is key advice that Stoney is dropping over here. Make sure you ask them questions.
Right. And what's funny is I had to do that. Like there's a certain level of, like, not to harp on this one kind of nuanced point, but like, I mean, you saw this in the live stream, like literally a minute before we went on, my mic was broken and I didn't know where you were, but I figured out how to just let it go a little bit. And, because the worst thing you can do is, like, it's going bad and you're panicking.
That's true. I found out there are very few things in life that are worth panicking about,
True. Yeah.
There are very few things in life that are worth panicking about.
And I think too, like, to your point about applying to a lot of jobs, if you only have one interview, the stakes and the pressure there, to where if you have 3 interviews, which, by the way, like, did you ever talk to Al Bellamy? Was he on the?
He was. I know he got a job recently.
So let me break down. Not only did he get a job, he got 3 offers for
that's impressive.
entry level.
Oh yes, I do remember this. Yeah.
So what he did was he built his personal brand in the analytics space before he had any analytic skills. Well, he was building them as he was learning them.
No, I was seeing that. Yeah.
But then he, like, got to negotiate the offers against each other, which is, I mean, that's kind of like some mental jujitsu right there.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. You and for my current job, that's what I did. I was debating between company A and Nordstrom, and I basically, I more or less, like, bounced offers off of each other. And company A was based out of a city that cost significantly less than Seattle, so, like, there was some math you had to do over there. But even then, they were willing to go close to matching Nordstrom in Seattle. And company A was in a low cost city,
Yeah, and man, I want to go down all the rabbit hole because I just enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, we have so much fun. Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing, like, I'm coaching someone right now who was underpaid for 3 years, and then she got an entry-level data science job.
Yeah, I remember. I forgot what her name was, but she was on my podcast episode.
Yeah, Molly. Yeah,
Molly.
So
Yeah.
She's working through the fact that she was undervalued for so long. Someone internalized that. So you got to be really careful about the job offers you take, because it's going to shape your self-image to some degree.
Oh, 100%. And that's where I would say, like, that's a situation in which I got very lucky, in that the salaries I just happened to get offered. I mean, I didn't really, it's like happened to get offered, were such that I have a perception as to how much I deserve to get paid now. That is, again, it's just shaped by, like, what you get. So yeah, again, it goes back to, if you are not looking to get into a very specific company, like, you're like, no, it's like, Google do or die, if you're not that type of person, with nothing wrong with that type of person. At some point in time, I would hope everyone is kind of like that in their career, where they're like, oh no, I want to do this very specific thing, let me go do it. Then apply to 100, 200 companies, bounce offers off each other, go ham. it's your career, it's your life, right? No one else is going to take care of it if you don't.
Yeah, well, and also too, this is like a man. We're geeking out hard here because I was listening to a podcast. They were talking about this concept called the hedonistic or hedonic treadmill. And,
yeah.
And they reframed imposter syndrome of your self-image hasn't quite caught up with where you are in life, which I think was a really interesting. Yeah. Well, and they took it to the far extreme of like, you know, like people who are super famous. Their expectations are so high that like not only am I the most important person in the room, but I have all the riches. I don't have to worry about all this stuff. So they kind of go crazy in a weird way. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting frame of imposter syndrome, and it's like a cautionary tale of be careful about the opportunities you take and kind of the energy in which you take them. Like don't take things out of desperation if you can, you know. But I mean,
Stoney's last comment is actually is key for exactly what you just said. And I would say, Gary Tan, the Silicon Valley investor, the Y Combinator guy.
I love him.
Amazing. He has a great quote, learn, earn, or quit. Basically meaning that like a job should either pay you really well, you should learn a lot from a job. It should either pay you really well or you should quit it. So 100%, I think Stoney brings up an important point that I kind of glossed over of make sure you're learning and growing.
I've seen that exact podcast. It was that like that 18-minute podcast? Man, he's doing it. But he's also like, I mean, he's exited a company for like what, $100 million or something?
Over $1 billion. That's like I wish more billionaires like had these like free sessions because I'm like, you've seen parts of the world that I can't even imagine exist, you know? And I just want to see, you know, like, you know, what do you think about it? And he gives amazing advice for free.
Awesome. Okay. So how about this? We're going to cut to one more commercial break and then bring Jeff back on. We're going to do, have you heard of Jobscan?
No.
Okay. So there's a little teaser. So I hope we don't lose too many people during this break, but I need a break to like compose myself.
Yeah.
Oh. In this case study course, you're going to learn 3 things. Number 1, you're going to improve your business acumen. This means that you're going to learn about how business works. Then we're going to move into the second point, which is analytics hard skills. So once we understand how the business works, we're then going to use some business intelligence tools, specifically Tableau, to solve the business problem and uncover insights. And then the third point, which is very, very important, are the soft skills. And the whole last chapter is dedicated to how you can more effectively explain your findings and also talk about past projects in an interview setting. To be a little bit more specific, you're going to be calculating the return on investment of 2 different marketing channels. So we're going to be looking at our Amazon and our Facebook ad spend. And there are 3 different data sources. So our first data source is our cost data source. And this is where we can see all of the ad spend, and it's in one data source. Then there is a sales data source for Facebook and a sales data source for Amazon. The challenge is that we're going to have to combine all 3 of these data sources together and then isolate our spending data and associate it with the relevant sales data source. By the end of the project, you're going to figure out which of these has the highest return on investment. But you're also going to have a challenge where you're going to visualize the data and see if there are any insightful trends that you could communicate to our end client. So if you're up for a challenge, then sign up and let's get started. All right, so let's bring Jeff on. Jeff, can you share your screen?
Yeah, let's go. Oh, sorry.
Not cut off your camera.
Yeah, my bad.
No. There we go.
All right, so let's see.
Okay, so Shashank, let me give you a breakdown. We had Sharon Vogler, who is the admissions counselor for Wake Forest Masters of Analytics program. And she showed us this tool that uses AI to match your resume with the job posting. What it does is it pulls specific keywords. Man, these people are being loud. Sorry, it's just a little distracting. But so Jeff, do you want to tell us a little bit about, because we ran it one time and I was wondering if we could kind of maybe we spruced it up, like you did your homework and spruced it up somewhat to match it a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that I did a decent job, because right here you can see the first scan, which was, I didn't do any editing to my resume or anything for this job posting, but it was a low match rate of 20%. It talks about here, you can kind of click through what the different things they're kind of scoring it based off of. So if you go under the ATS tip, this is kind of just the company information. And then you can kind of go into here to the skill words that they are, the keywords and the skills they're looking for. So you can see the areas you need to work on and what you kind of need to include. And you can go down to soft skills. So it's kind of just giving you some more insight onto everything, which can be helpful. So, and then, yeah, there's other ones, the job title, education, these kinds of little things right here. But yeah, so you pretty much, you can get a free account on this as well. So that's what I have. I'm not paying for it, but you go into here to update or scan. So I posted the new and edited resume back into here, and then you can come and do the job description as well. I think my cover letter updated this time. In the previous scan, I didn't have it, but it's not really showing me if it did or not. So we'll find out in just a second.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So Shashank, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, because we had this guy, Jim Stern, who's a marketing analytics expert, and he was talking about how bad artificial intelligence is for recruiting, because it really has strong biases, and the biases are even baked into how you talk about yourself. But this is specifically just trying to get you past the ATS system. Shashank, do you know, like, I don't know, have you had much exposure to ATS, or like what is your thought process around getting around that first? Because like at Nordstrom, I imagine they probably have 1,000 applicants for every job posting, and there's just no feasible way for human eyes to scan every single one of them. So maybe we could just talk about the problem that ATS solves first.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. There are unfortunate biases built into this system. The problem it solves is in the age of the internet, when there is no physical barrier to you applying to a job. You know, I could go apply to a job at Lockheed Martin right after this live stream in 10 minutes, you know, if I wanted to. And I can just as easily go and apply to a job in Germany if I wanted to, like right now. In a world where you have that little friction between people and applying for jobs, you have to automate certain parts of it. At the end of the day, there's no way it's not worth the company's money to hire the number of contractors you'd have to hire to go through every single resume, especially when you could probably get rid of, you know, a good, I could say you could confidently get rid of 30% of resumes just because people just don't have the basic skills necessary for the job. And they're kind of just like, they're scattershotting everything. And so, yeah, ATS is necessary, I think. Now that being said, I don't know how the AI behind it actually works, so I can't comment too much on it, but I would be very surprised if there were no biases inside, you know, what it decides to, depending on how automated it is, right? Like, if it's just keyword search, then, you know, I don't know if I call that heavily biased.
Right.
But, you know, like there are probably, I would be surprised if Workday, you know, one of the biggest HR management platforms in the world, isn't creating solutions, as people like to call products, that automatically find the best candidates. And I've actually seen Workday's funnel, at least a basic one. What happens is that they'll like bring people down level by level in the funnel, and it's and like for every qualification that you have, so it'll be like education, you know, years of experience, stuff like this. And it's unfortunate because it's a situation in which your projects may not necessarily pass an ATS. That's not to say don't do projects; they're very important. But ATS can nullify the importance of those projects if they are not written about correctly on the resume.
Yeah, I think that this is a conversation that's just not being had at the entry level, or especially for internships, about personal branding, which is, I mean, you saw the intro sequence. That's like one of the main things that we're touching on this semester is how to effectively communicate yourself. Because yeah, you like Jeff, you could write about the email marketing campaign and not use analytics one time. And they were like, the ATS would interpret that as, oh, this person's a marketing specialist, not a marketing analytics specialist. Yeah. And those specific key terms, which, I mean, we pull this up. I mean, you just showed the breakdown of like, they have, this software is phenomenal. It like shows you you're missing this keyword, this keyword, this keyword. So you just go in and add it up. You want to hit play on that bad boy and see if we
so let's see how much better we did. I tweaked it a little bit, didn't go crazy into it to rewrite the whole thing, but I'm hoping to get at least a 50% on this one.
Okay, does it take a while to scan? Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, only 9% better.
No, well, I thought it said less than 20%.
It did say less than 20%, so it could be a good chunk better, but it's definitely still needs some work to get it before applying.
Well, but also too, though, I feel like you need to make a decision whether you want to go into SQL, because it sounds like that's a key skill for this job. And like you could take Shashank's hour-long course, get the basics, but then you may want to do like some type of additional what is it, like Code Academy or Code Camp, something? It's like
Data Camp, Code Academy, something, you know.
So they give you practice sets for you to like work through, and that's something you could do kind of like a week or two before
your interview.
Well, because what's wild is Tina Huang actually got a job as a data scientist at a major FANG company, and she taught her. Shashank, have you heard it? This is like
hers is crazy. This is like one of those crazy stories where it's like, my God, this woman's insane. I love it. But you know, I mean, and that's exactly what you could do. Here's the thing. Probably the worst experience I've had interviewing someone was, or not the worst experience. One of my biggest pet peeves in interviewing is when a candidate says, I know Python, I know SQL. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and, you know, and I just bust out the computer. I'm like, okay, like do this thing for me. And it's a super basic thing. Like they have to know how to do it. Otherwise, like, you know, and then they just flounder over there, because that they instantly shot all credibility they have with me, where I'm like, I don't know if anything you said is true anymore. I'm like, you could have given me the most elaborate explanation as to how you would solve a problem, but you said you knew this thing and you don't know the absolute basics of it. So I would 100% say you're more than okay putting skills you don't know on your resume, but when it comes like time for the interview, you better be ready to answer that question. And you know, Tina Huang really did the you know, the hard work of like studying nonstop, I think for like an entire like 2 weeks or something, for that interview, you know.
Right. And I imagine Volvo is not going to be as I don't know, rigorous as
FANG companies are ridiculous with like how rigorous they are. Yeah, no, they are very, very intense.
Right. Shashank, you're cracking me up that you're in a Starbucks right now.
Yeah, I was told to be quieter.
Oh. Ridiculous. Okay. So
I did have one question for Sean about I guess like the skills section. So and here it kind of breaks down the keywords and skills you're looking for. I mean, there's like 66 different ones. But I guess some of them I was kind of picking and choosing which ones I thought would be the most important. But I guess using the software, what kind of insight can you give? Like, should I be shooting for getting 66 out of 66, or is it kind of just play by ear what you think's best?
So could you go back down to the skill section? So I noticed that this is going to be for Volvo Financial Services. So if I were you, I would definitely see if you have any courses in your coursework that are like on accounting or anything to do with finances. Okay, see if you can really highlight those. Because VFS, these are like all the auto manufacturers. They have like an entirely separate financial entity that like is like a hardcore financial company. It's all about giving out loans, making sure stuff's paid on time and everything. And so I would say you want to target some skills, because there's no way you can know all of this. There's no way anyone can know all of this stuff, you know? So I would target some key ones.
Gotcha.
Finance, because it's VFS, you know, that's like the core of their business. And then I would say pick SQL or Python. And then you already know Tableau is my understanding.
Yeah.
So I would say go pick up Power BI really quickly. The thing is, if you know Tableau, Power BI is relatively easy to pick up.
Oh, they know Power BI.
Yeah, we've gone over that. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, so I would definitely put in Power BI in your. Oh, it looks like you already have it in there. Let's see. In that case, yeah, it looks like SQL comes up a lot, and I would guess that they would expect you to do a lot of SQL based on just like, especially if it's VFS. In finance, SQL is used very, very heavily. So I think SQL is what I would focus on. The finance and the SQL are the two skills you should target, because you can't know all of this stuff.
I feel like this is a therapy session. So Jeff.
Yeah, I've definitely been getting some good insight from this.
Well, Jeff, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you want to be writing code? Or
Oh, definitely not writing code. I've taken
Okay.
a couple classes in that. I'm not a fan. I don't know, just never. But also, I guess you talked about the intimidation factor. I've not ever gotten over that part. But I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more towards the finance world or sales. It's kind of where my head's at. But analytics, I definitely think is a great tool and a potential kind of foot in the door into kind of that world as well. So.
Well, because the thing that we might glean out of this kind of thought exercise with, I mean, Shashank, I'm so glad you're here because you're like the person to talk to you about this. What we may learn from this is that, all right, well, this isn't the right opportunity for you because I know a lot of organizations who are doing financial analysis are still in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know why that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, because. Well, we talked about the hazards of fat fingered an O instead of a 0 and overcharging someone like $1 million because it's happened to people that I know. I don't understand why the financial services are so far behind the technology curve. But maybe what we can do is instead of you applying for this position, this is interesting because it sounds like maybe Volvo Financial Group, which by the way, we actually had last semester. We had the analytics manager from this exact company, Fabio Alamini, on. But what's interesting is he's since shifted position, is now in Charlotte, so he's no longer here. That would have been so cool if we had been like, hey, can you tell Jeff like what you're looking for in this position? But so maybe we could go to a different job posting, and I'd be more than happy to help you.
Oh, yeah. We kind of just picked for the one that we're using for today's example. We kind of just picked the first one we saw that was kind of checked off some of the boxes. So.
But Shashank, I saw you nodding your head when you were saying that the financial industry seems to be a little bit behind the tech curve.
I don't know why. Well, it depends. So the financial industry can be broken up into many different components. On one end, if you're talking about like investment banks, investment banks and hedge funds, finance people are the absolute bleeding edge of a lot of analytics. Like Renaissance Technologies is a really great example of like a hedge fund that has consistently beaten the markets for like probably over a decade now. I don't know if they exist anymore. I heard they got like dissolved or something. But long story short, the finance industry has to be broken up into many different parts. If you're talking like New York finance people, like New York investment banking, the people who work in analytics departments in hedge funds are some of the most talented analysts in the entire world. And the pay matches that as well. Now, if you're talking about like Toyota Financial Group, Volvo Financial Group, and like financial departments inside companies, that's a very different story. That's when you start talking. For some reason, the analytics implementations are just not impressive in a lot of financial groups, and I don't know why. Yeah, they're just like behind the technical curve. I'm guessing I would guess it has something to do with the people that get hired. They are people who have educations in finance and not in like computer science or analytics. And stuff like that. That would be my guess as to why.
So
but I can't really comment on
it's
that,
funny because my intuition is telling me the opposite. I think it's a top-down cultural thing. Like, because I've worked with a fair amount of CFOs, and they are because we've talked about this briefly. I think in the Power BI lecture. I've worked with CMOs, CEOs, COOs, and CFOs. CMOs, chief marketing officers, love to have beautiful visualizations that are interactive. The CFOs that I've consulted with, they want like tabular data that they can pull out and manipulate in Excel. So I think that the CFOs of most companies are just it's a cultural thing. And actually, this is this is an interesting anecdote that I don't think I've shared with the students. I for sure shared this on the podcast. But back two or 3 years ago, I was the treasurer for a local nonprofit, and I met the former CFO of Wrangler Jeans, and we grabbed a beer, and he was like, "Hey, I'm looking to pivot into the nonprofit space," and he actually joined my finance committee, so I got to manage the former CFO of Wrangler Jeans. But I mean, we had a pretty casual relationship where like we would talk about the finances on a monthly basis, like over a beer at a brewery or something. So I got to see kind of a little bit of an inside glimpse of that space, but for sure he uses, he would show me these like nested financial models. Like it would have multiple sheets and then they would link to each other. I don't know what that is, but that's very different than a lot of the other kind of C-suite executives.
Well, I think some insight, and this is just me speculating over here, that like you gave is like a CMO versus CFO, right? If you think about it, like a CFO is heavily restricted in what they're allowed to do. and like how you're allowed to analyze data. At the end of the day, finance, especially after Enron, the corporate finance groups were heavily restricted, and CFOs could be jailed for because of Soxley for not for basically like having financial statements that were not like airtight, more or less. How effective that was, I'm not 100% sure. But if you're talking about like a CMO, right? What happened to the marketing world in the last 20 years? All of a sudden, you went from like TV advertising and like these mass advertising formats towards internet advertising, where you have to micro target to consumers, and the industry's fundamentally changed versus finance. In finance, the industry became fundamentally more restrictive, but in marketing, it became a lot more cutthroat, where it's like, okay, now you're competing against a billion other people who want to advertise to all the eyes out there, and you have to push everything through Google. You have to understand Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics. This is very much me just speculating, but I would assume that has something to do with it. The Soxley and all of the regulation that came around the finance industry after Enron might have had something to do with the fact that like why finance is a lot more slow to adopt, or corporate finance can be a lot slower to adopt new technology than say marketing. And the analytics field in marketing is insane. Like the amount of analytics that goes into marketing is some next level.
I'm loving it. I'm having so much fun in sales, marketing, analytics. But Davis, you have a question in our private chat, so I'm just going to pull you in so you can ask Shashank the question yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote in the chat, what is a test question per se you would ask someone to interview, or what would you have them do? But I'm not really familiar with SQL or Python, but maybe like Tableau or Power BI. Like, what would you have them do?
Okay, so the standard template we have in Nordstrom. So we have a standard template at Nordstrom, and then like I've done different stuff in different companies, but it's all more or less the same. Basically, we give them a packaged Tableau workbook with a bunch of data inside it, and it's similar to the store data set that comes inside Tableau. And basically, we say, okay, like in the comments section of the workbook, there is a series of 5 tasks they need to do. So it'll be a blank page, and on that page it'll say like, okay. Show revenue, show revenue per state. Basically, we're asking them to show a granular view of a certain metric. That would be like, the first step. Then the next one would be like, okay, join these 2 data sources. Or sometimes we'll say join these data sources, sometimes we won't. But we'll say join these 2 data sources and tell me how well are we selling in a given city. The next one will be okay, like make a graph or make a geospatial visualization for me, make like a map visualization for me, and then eventually we can get into more advanced stuff where it's like, if we have a Tableau Jedi in the room, then I might just insert something about TabPy, just like start asking him questions about that. But we usually never get to that step. But that's more or less what it is. We will have a workbook, a series of questions about the data, and ask them to show us how they want to answer that question. Because it tackles all aspects of it. It's like, okay, this is like actually what you do with Tableau. You're given a question, you have to answer it. And that's kind of like what we usually quiz them on. SQL, same thing. It's the same thing. It's just with, SQL. The only thing is with SQL, it can get a bit more complicated because you have to really understand the language to, you have to map out your steps beforehand. Whereas on Tableau, you can kind of like map it out as you're doing it. But yeah, SQL will ask them to do very similar stuff too. Like, here's a business question, go answer it for me.
So I have a follow-up question for you, Davis. I know that you're interested in working in Power BI. Is SQL a skill set that you're thinking about cultivating?
Honestly, I've never thought about it.
Interesting.
I just didn't know how much it related.
Well, I think that's a problem. Yeah, because I didn't really know about SQL. This is embarrassing, but like I was taking on consulting projects, and I was very limited by the projects I could take on Upwork because I had no idea what SQL was. And Shashank, I know that's something that you've talked about at least a little bit, of like getting a side hustle, finding side work or consulting projects on Upwork. But I mean, I found like one project throughout the years that I could work on Upwork because I guess it's so prevalent. But almost all the clients I've had, it's like Excel to Tableau or Power BI, and then that was the work right there.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on like, who you're working with, right? Like if you start working with larger corporations, everything's going to be stuck behind a SQL database. Like no one's storing anything inside Excel over there, except for finance. Finance does. But
Right.
That's where I would say, like, if you want to advance with Tableau work or Power BI work, you would be heavily benefited by learning SQL. Because the way I kind of see it, like, I kind of like you have data scientist, data analyst, BI professionals, right? And the roles can be interchangeable, but I would say, like, kind of like the big difference between like a BI professional and like a data analyst is usually, or in at least at Nordstrom, is a knowledge of SQL. And where a BI professional is usually given access to a database that's been cleaned up by a data analyst. And then they're like, okay, now go make the dashboard and answer the business question with this. Whereas the data analyst might do the entire stack from like cleaning up the SQL database all the way to visualizing the data. And the data scientist is supposed to create data. So for example, a really great example is we don't actually know how many people are in our stores at any given time. And we have data scientists build out models that model out, given these other metrics, this is approximately how many people are in the store at a given time. So it's data that didn't exist that is now there. So I think I would say SQL allows you to move further down the value chain, if you're at all interested in doing that. Now, obviously, I didn't learn SQL until like, a year and a half ago or something. My first job, I didn't know SQL at all. So I was able to derive a lot of value just purely from Tableau. But I think you'll quickly find yourself running into a wall if you choose not to learn SQL eventually.
Yeah, and I think I've been lucky. Not lucky. You're right. It has to do with the market size. So my consulting clients are anywhere from 200 million down to like probably 5 million in revenue. So they don't have huge swaths of data that require a database for you to access it. Although the client that we just signed this month, I think, I know they have their own database. They had an architect build everything out. So I'm just coming in to do the infrastructure design, which I think is fun and interesting. But also too, they're like asking me like, hey, here's our business model. What are the KPIs? And I'm kind of in an advisory role. So I'm telling them like how they should measure their business. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. I mean, that's me architecting the data would just be so boring in my opinion. But I think Shashank brings up a very good point that if you know coding and you know SQL, it's going to open up a lot of doors. You can be a lot more nimble in terms of the career trajectory that you choose.
More jobs are open to you as well, So
right.
But again, I wouldn't worry too much about learning it like immediately. My first job, I didn't know SQL, so.
Yeah. All right. So Davis, since you asked, okay, what your question was, what is a test question you would ask someone in an interview? I'm putting you on the spot. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Shashank, do you have a mock interview question that we could have Davis answer? And then that's going to be the end of the episode.
Okay. A Tableau question, I'm guessing, right? A Tableau Power BI question.
Okay. Well, so Davis, I know that your father works. So this was a really cool situation that happened earlier on in the live stream series. Is that we're doing this hashtag GC Analytics, and people are posting what they learned about in a live stream on that handle. Davis posted something. Turns out his dad, does he own the business or is he just a consultant in the business?
It's his business, yeah.
So apparently they do Power BI reporting, and then we were lucky enough that they sent us a huge raw data file for us to analyze in class, which is awesome. So I mean, it's cool to see how LinkedIn can just like it's just broadcast opportunity your way. Like you can broadcast and then bring opportunity to you. So yeah, so let's ask Davis a BI, so Tableau or Power BI. Shashank, you guys use Tableau, right?
Yes, we do.
All right, so let's tailor it to specifically Tableau, and let's do it for like an entry level job because Davis, I think you have your first Power BI or Tableau dashboard built out. So yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, rudimentary, but sure.
Yeah, okay. It's gonna be a little bit difficult to do without an actual like interface in front of us. But here's the thing. I guess if you could like imagine the Tableau interface in front of you, right? Given a bunch of data, where would you put the little pills? I think they call them pills. such that you could visualize the amount of revenue each city brings in for the company, and you have all the columns necessary to do this. So revenue per company, how would you, what type of graph would you use? There you go. What type of graph would you use? And generally speaking, how would you build that out?
Revenue per company.
Per city.
Per city.
Oh, per city. I guess the that geospatial map.
So proud.
would be the best way. But yeah, that's my best answer, I guess.
Okay. And then, is there any reason you didn't pick a bar chart?
I think considering what Tableau is and how it's sort of a visualization thing, you want to maybe capitalize on the fact that that could help you sort of see, somebody who doesn't understand it can see it a little better.
And that's good, like this is how I like to interview people. I like to ask them a question, even if they're completely right. If they get the question 100% right, I want them to know why they got it right.
I'm role playing as a panelist here. I have further questions for you, Davis. Sure. All right, so there are two different types of maps. Which one would you use?
Oh, I had no idea there's two types of maps. What are the two options, maybe?
So there's a bubble map and a heat map. Which do you think would be more effective in this situation?
I'm going to go with the heat map.
Interesting. Why?
Because you can sort of see the volume based on the level of shade that you're getting, as opposed to, I don't know, bubbles to me just don't seem as, I don't know. Maybe I don't know the answer.
All right, so James Brown is agreeing with you here. So you got a lifeline. Heat map. Well, okay. So this is an interesting point. What you could do is you could turn the bubble map into a heat map. Do you have any ideas on how you could potentially execute on that?
I'm gonna go with no. I don't think I know how to do that.
Okay. Well, what you could do is just drag the sales volume into the color, and then maybe the size of the bubble could show population density.
Okay.
Which could be really interesting. So Davis, let's walk through that exercise. If we're looking at bubbles and the size is the density, or the size of the bubble is the population density, and then the color is how many sales. Which of those bubbles do you think would be the most effective or the most interesting from a analytics perspective?
The size is the volume, as you said.
So think about it. All right. So we have Greensboro, which would be this size, and then we have New York City, which would be this size.
Okay.
And then there would be different colors based on the sales.
Well,
which do you think would be more interesting? Oh man,
I'm gonna
chat. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna go with the fact that you gotta, since you did such an extreme example, if you have Greensboro with, a lot of sales per capita, for example, as opposed to New York City, who maybe, they have a lot more sales in relation to Greensboro, but not per capita, you got to kind of look at both. My answer might be both.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the idea is that let me reframe the question. So what if all right, so we've got Greensboro that is this size, and we've got New York City that is this size. Let's say that both the same shade of blue. Which do you think would be, which location are we penetrating the market better?
I guess New York City.
Yeah, it'd be the opposite. Because think about it, it's the same shade, so the same sales volumes, but one city has a much lower population. Sorry, Shashank, I totally derailed your question.
No, you're totally fine. I think I actually would have disagreed. I would have said bubble map. Or let me rephrase that. I think it would go back to what Stoney Vincent said in the chat, where it depends on, okay, can you even make a heat map for this data? There's a reason I said city and not state.
Okay.
Unless you have geospatial points, unless you have centroids, what they call them,
like
not centroids, the actual shape of the city, you wouldn't even be able to build a map for a city. Because what if you had the city in New York that's not New York City, the capital, Albany. If you had Albany and New York City, in your data set, then you wouldn't be able to do a heat map of that because you don't have the actual data to do that. So, and I find that data relatively rare to have. You rarely have like city boundaries in your data. So not that you couldn't get it, but you rarely have it. So I would actually say a bubble map is the only option available to you here. Again, unless you have the city boundaries with you.
Okay, can you unpack your thinking of the bar chart versus the geomap?
Yeah, so the thing is, at least in my experience, I think whenever I go to my stakeholders with a geomap first, it's usually really confusing to people because you usually have to ease people into more advanced visualizations that they're not used to seeing. And so I always start off with a bar chart. And I always show them, okay, like everyone understands this, everyone knows what this is, everyone knows how to read this, right? And then from there, I will then gradually start adding more and more stuff, and I'll like add in the geospatial thing. Unless, for example, if they work in supply chain, if it's supply chain is completely different, where it's like, okay, like your entire job is geography based, everything you do is geography based. In which case, like if you're mapping out supply chains, it makes a lot more sense to do that in a geospatial chart from the get-go. So what I'm saying is not necessarily the right answer. It is, I'm just, and this is where, you know, this kind of comes with experience, right? You bring in consideration of like, okay, yeah, in my experience, I can't just go to someone like immediately with a map and show them, hey, look at this map. I have to like go to them with a bar chart, show them the bar chart, and then go from there. Additionally, the big benefit with a bar chart over almost every other chart type is that humans are really bad at perceiving the difference in color shades and in volumes. So this is, for example, why a pie chart is generally not a great chart to use, because unless the volumes are, unless you have like vastly different volumes between each other, you can't perceive which one is bigger than the other one. Like 33 and 30% look the exact same to most people. But a bar is that length is really easy to compare from, you know, unit to unit. So it kind of sucks, but like I oftentimes find myself just falling back to bar charts because they're so versatile and they're like amazing charts. And yeah, usually I find myself having to work my way up into a map for people.
What's funny is that so Raj is getting a PhD at UNCG, which is like 10 minutes away from me, in geology or geography. I always get the two mixed up, but he knows all about.
This is a great way to do it.
Yeah, he knows all about.
Yep.
So Raj is saying you can get spatial file polygons from the internet to get city boundaries. Tiger format also has census data, including in Polygon. I love our community. Yep. They're just like super nerds, and it's like also like such niche information that they just like know because they're getting a PhD. It goes even deeper. Topologically integrated.
I didn't know that's what Tiger stood for.
Encoded and referencing. So there you go. That is the lesson of the day. Also, Dave, you got the job. Nailed it. Good job. All right. Well, we're coming up. It's right at 3. So students class is dismissed. Shashank, this was awesome. I really, really enjoyed this. This is so much fun.
No, thanks for having me on, John David. It's always a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, well, I'm getting smoother with the live streams because at first it was like, oh, there's 7 students. I have a guest. I have like, I don't know, it looks like there's 17 people still tuned in just on YouTube. So this is a lot, but Shashank, you've got some excellent wisdom. So let's plug you one more time. If you guys want to get step-by-step SQL like tutorials or lesson, head over to Shashank's YouTube channel. You can see it right here, how to spell his name specifically. But thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much for all again, the comment section was amazing. It was a lot of fun to see what people had to say. And I love having, I love having everyone in the comment section. I especially love having experienced people in the comment section because they'll often call me out and say like, no, this is a better way to do it. No, that's a better way to do it. Yesterday, I got called out by someone saying my for loops are too slow and I need to be using enumerate. So, you know, learn something every day.
Well, I mean, it's like you're crowdsourcing your knowledge. I mean, it's huge value. And also Stony, I mean, Stony is just dropping like, what's funny is people are asking in the live chat Stony's opinions on specific things. So it's like we have a whole side conversation with the main conversation. This is a really wild experience, but thank you. All right. Well, we are going to sign off and thank everyone. Thank you for everyone in the live chat and all the students who tuned in. Shashank, you're amazing.